Okay, so we're back. I hope you like the lunch with halloumi. And have the pleasure of having with us Jason Charalambous, the chairman of the Conservative Friends of Cyprus. So instead of presenting you, can you talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you very much, Nicolas, for having me here, and congratulations on what you've achieved in this initiative in London, obviously what you've built the last few years with the Cyprus Forum on the island.
Thanks.
So I'm a commercial lawyer in the City of London, trained barrister, practicing solicitor advocate now. I have a number of voluntary roles as well. I chair the Conservative Friends of Cyprus, a group that was established in 1992 by Dr. Ian Twin, the former British Member of Parliament for Edmonton, with the intention of building and fostering closer ties between the British political establishment and the Republic of Cyprus, improving bilateral ties, improving understanding, developing new friends in Parliament, and I've been chairing that since 2015, I think. And we've had a lot of success through various initiatives in winning new friends for our community and for Cyprus. I also am the founding chairman of an organisation called the Trent Park Museum Trust, working on the development of a museum in North London, in Clonc Fosters. Museum focused on World War II. Actually, it's a site that's been described on par with Bletchley Park for its role in World War II, and we hope to open to the public next year. trentparkhouse.org.uk. Beyond that, I'm a former local councillor. In my 20s, I served as a local London Borough councillor. I stood for Parliament a couple of times. Don't think I'll be standing again anytime soon. And numerous other things. I'm a trustee of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, involved in a charity that fundraises for disabled children. And I think that's enough. I think that's enough now.
Very interesting and impressive. And you're active, you're quite active politically. What can you say about other Cypriots in the UK? Are they active enough? What else could be done? What's your view on this?
Okay. Yeah, so we have, as a community, we have many British Cypriots involved, particularly in local government. So we've had, and we continue to have, many Cypriots who are British Cypriots who are elected local councillors. Of course, we're all very proud to see Bambos as a British Cypriot member of Parliament as well, and others who have had Cypriot roots who've been in Parliament. My observation is, however, that whilst we are okay represented, I won't say well, but okay represented at local level, I think it's surprising for a community of our size. The figure 300,000 has been thrown around for about 30 years, but I imagine there's a lot more people with Cypriot roots today in the UK. For a community of our size, it's without a doubt that we are significantly underrepresented in public life and politics, particularly at the higher levels. And I think it's something as a community we have to question why that is, and find means to address that.
And why? Why do you think we are underrepresented? And what do you think you should do to change that? And why? Why should we change that? Why should Cypriots be more represented on a political level in this country?
Of course. Well, I think we're a relatively young community in the United Kingdom, where we had big waves of immigration, of course, really around the time of independence and subsequently. And I think obviously the objective of the priority of the first immigrants from Cyprus to the UK was survival, to make a living, to work hard, to provide for their families. Engaging in public life is a luxury. When you're in that position, you can't necessarily have time and can't afford. Of course, we're now got people in our community of second, third, even fourth generation in this country. And yet, whilst we have an exceptional community which is excelling in so many fields, every field really in this country, from business to the professions to academia to medicine to really every field, education. We're not represented well politically, and it could just be a case that we are still a young community, but it could be that maybe let's say the messaging from the first generation parents and grandparents has been, work hard, make a living, so you don't have to struggle like we struggled in providing for your children. But I think that's changed. I think, people are starting to realize that they can juggle both a professional life or a life in private society, whilst also finding time to do public service on the side. They're not incompatible. For example, being a local councillor doesn't involve, not necessarily a full-time job. Yep. Many people maintain full-time jobs and perform their councillor duties in the evenings and weekends. Obviously, to then take the leap to stand for elected office, it is a big sacrifice, because in order to even go through the motions of hopefully, getting a seat, getting elected, you do have to sacrifice a lot of time, just the way that the setup is in this country. But I'm seeing that is starting to change. That is starting to change, and I think we just have to really. It's about encouragement. It's about mentoring. It's about inspiring. People who already got senior roles in our community to help inspire, do what they can, speaking platforms, mentoring to inspire the younger generation, and also remind. I think there is another problem, which is to remind British Cypriots, or say second, third, fourth generation, that there is no glass ceiling, that you are as British as anybody else, and you shouldn't feel any sort of barrier, because I think there is, and sometimes in the minds of some, that maybe that's too English for me, that's too, Parliament is too remote for someone like me, the son of immigrants. And I think if that mindset exists, and I think it does for certain people, I think that needs to be tackled and addressed and say, actually, there should be no barrier to your ambitions if you do have ambitions to pursue public life.
In terms of platforms similar to the Conservative Friends of Cyprus, what others are there? And also, is there a Labour Friends for Cyprus, or should there be, in your opinion?
Absolutely, there should be. First and foremost, there should be a Liberal Democrat, Friends of Cyprus. Dare I say there should be what are they called, UKIP, or whatever they're called, Friends of Cyprus. I mean, dare I say there should be representatives of our community involved in every political party in this country, and ideally in an organised way. I think the Labour Friends of Cyprus has appeared and disappeared over many years now, and I'd very much like to see, especially if they're, Labour will be in power at some point, maybe not this year, maybe in the next election, who knows, but it's very important for us to be represented as a community within, particularly the governing party,
yes.
if that time arises. And there's no reason why there isn't a Liberal Democrat Friends of Cyprus. There is a very good Liberal Democrat councillor, and there are others of Cypriot heritage. So it's really important, because it provides a face for the Cypriot diaspora within the political establishment in this country, which would otherwise not necessarily be visible and not exist. And just having that internal presence in a British political party is so important, so you can obviously develop networks, raise important issues that affect our community, develop those relationships, which don't only help issues that are affecting people in our diaspora, sometimes issues that are unique to people in our diaspora, but also in encouraging that bridge building with the Republic of Cyprus and those bilateral ties as well.
Yeah. In terms of, the policy of the Republic of Cyprus, do you think that there are things that the government should do to, let's say, enhance and encourage the political involvement of British Cypriots?
It's a difficult question, because I think, the best movements are grassroots driven. And I think, we are established enough in the community here in the UK for British Cypriots to be able to take the initiative to encourage themselves and those around them and the next generations to take that leap. I think having involvement from Cyprus directly is not only not necessary, but not necessarily conducive as well. Yes. But of course, there is always room for encouragement, support, particularly in a lot of the programs that are held, where you take people from the diaspora to visit Cyprus to learn more about it. There are, wonderful trips that things like organizations like Nebomak and others organize, where you try and encourage and inspire, especially the younger generation, to know more about their roots and their homeland. That's excellent. We also have a fantastic High Commission who for many years has been so dynamic and so supportive, indirectly, in nurturing that sense of Cypriotness, which sometimes is lost, of course, for whatever reason, among some members of our diaspora through all the events and initiatives they hold, whether they're on culture or beyond. And I think that's the role for, if the Cypriot government or High Commission is to play a role, I think that's the role it should play, just to encourage and remind British Cypriots who they are and their roots, and make them feel part of it, part of the wider Cypriot world.
Yeah, yeah. One more question, maybe then we can open it up for questions. What's the approach of British policymakers, which, in your party that you mostly interact with, how do they see Cyprus through the years? And what is these, issues that you think that we're not doing correctly policy-wise in Cyprus, that we could, improve and then be able to pitch some ideas to the British policymakers more easily, so that they promote our policies, either geopolitical or business or trade or whatever, technology. What do you think is the disadvantage of Cyprus when you talk with British policymakers?
So dare I say, I think, so first and foremost, obviously the UK and Cyprus has an extremely rich and long history. I often tell the story that actually people think it began maybe with the 1878 or maybe with Richard the Lionheart, with his marriage in Cyprus, but actually, we learned some years ago that it began with Aristobulus of Britannia, the Cypriot who came, in the first century after Christ, to preach Christianity in Britain, the first Christian preacher in England, for example. So the history is, the relationship is historic, it's deep, it's complicated, it's messy at times. And the problem, though, is that I've got to say Cyprus has an image problem, particularly in Britain, has an image problem because of the history of the struggle for independence, because of subsequent events. We do have an image problem, but Cyprus has never really seen the need, I think, and I talk about maybe from the government's perspective, to invest in PR, to actually understand the importance of selling the positive stories, the positive accomplishments, achievements of this small island, and particularly its diaspora, to people in Britain, decision makers in Britain, policy makers in Britain. So I think one thing I think we've certainly made a lot of progress in with the Conservative Friends of Cyprus is changing that perception. We ask people in this country who contribute a tremendous amount to this country in all fields, in all sectors, and reminding British decision makers and policy makers that we are significant, we do contribute. From the lowest level of paying our taxes to the highest levels in every field, and changing that perception is so critically important, but it can only be done if you're aware that actually there is an image problem to begin with, and therefore there is really an impetus to change that perception.
Sorry to interrupt. When you say image problem, can you be more specific? What are they accusing us of? About the Cyprus issue, about corruption, or what kind of accusation?
I think that the latter point on corruption is a very interesting one. Now, Cyprus obviously has struggled with this disease for a long time. But it is not necessarily unique. It's certainly not unique as a country in doing so. We have to ask ourselves why there's corruption in this country. Of course there is. There was an influx of Russian money into this country, like there has been for some decades in Cyprus. And why is it that when the headlines come up about corruption in Europe, it's always Cyprus that's talked about? But actually, if you look at it, I remember looking actually not that long ago at the international, I forget what it is, Transparency International, the database where Cyprus actually comes on the corruption index. It's actually relatively low, surprisingly, today. So why is it that when that issue comes up, Cyprus is always painted as a bad guy of Europe? When in fact, I'm not saying things are perfect. I'm not saying there are huge things, progress that has been made, and a heck of a lot of progress that needs to happen
Yes.
to heal Cyprus of this problem. But why does the press, particularly in this country, always focus on Cyprus in such a negative way?
Yeah, yeah.
Where are the counter-arguments to say, yes, it has got this problem, but look at what it's doing to address it? So that's.
I agree with you. I mean, communication and PR is important, although you have to have, good content so that you can have a good image. So I think it's twofold. And
Of course.
but I mean, in terms of lobbying or changing the the narrative here, it's really important.
I'll just say as well,
yeah.
I think from a diaspora perspective, from a perspective, say, of a British Cypriot and of British Cypriots, our role really should be to sing the achievements, first and foremost, of our diaspora and what we've achieved as British Cypriots. The fact that we're Cypriots by heritage, some of us are Cypriots by citizenship, but we are British, we are English, we should be talking about our community. What the government of Cyprus does, okay, it's important. But it shouldn't be our job as a community to be talking about what's happening in Cyprus. We're not electors in Cyprus. We're not, by all means we can talk about it, we can suggest improvements and changes. But we should really, as a number one priority, be talking about what we're doing here, how we're contributing to British society, how we can continue to contribute if given the chance.
Yeah. And let's not forget, I mean, in the United Kingdom, we have the second largest presence of Cypriots after Cyprus and before Greece.
Yes.
Okay.
Huge.
Comments, suggestions, remarks? Yes, Olivia. Can I have the microphone?
It's okay, I can speak loud. Jason, it's lovely to see you on the podium today. I'm glad you made that distinction at the end. Because it goes back to your original point about your identity as a Cypriot and breaking that glass ceiling that sometimes there's a mental barrier for members of our community, and that there is a glass ceiling to break through. So I wanted to ask you whether you can share some of your experiences about when and if your Cypriot identity has actually helped you in where you are today, in what you've done in this country, and whether you can, say, be a mentor for those younger generations of British Cypriots who may have that mental barrier that you refer to, and how you can help them see through to the future and what they can do with whatever it is they're doing in this country.
Very good. Yeah. I think you hit on the issue of identity, and I think, we're not Americans where you can be in America it's easy, you can be an Italian American, you can be a Greek American. Those dual identities work very much in harmony in, say, the United States. In Britain, I think many people, particularly the first generation of immigrants, the second generation, they struggle necessarily often to balance the dual identities, being English, British on the one hand, being somebody of immigrant roots, Cypriot, let's say, on the other. And my experience is that I've had to teach myself how to balance the two, how you can be both, and how the two are not exclusive of each other. It's not either or. You can actually fuse the two together, and they actually work very complementary. I don't think everybody has that experience. I think a lot of people in our community struggle with either they go one way heavily or the other. They either completely embed themselves in their community and don't sort of forget the fact that they're actually in England, in Britain, and they have, and then you get others who abandon, not abandon is the wrong word, but maybe suppress maybe their Cypriotness in order to be fitting in. So I think the message is that it's really actually entirely possible to be both. The two identities really can work in 2024 Britain particularly. It might not have been the case decades ago, for sure, but certainly today it's entirely possible to fuse the two identities, where the two identities can work completely complementarily with each other. Has it helped the Cypriot roots? For me, absolutely. I mean, knowing, being the son of first-generation immigrants, my parents both have their heavy Cypriot accents. My grandparents, they came with, till they died, spoke very little English. Knowing that, this journey took place, from this small, impoverished island to Britain, and the journey they went through, like the journey many of our parents and grandparents made as British Cypriots, it's a source of inspiration. It's a real source of inspiration. That there should be no barriers to achievement, to success. And, you know, whatever ceiling you think exists, it does not exist, and you should not, if you see a ceiling, it will exist. Just, you have to tell yourself there is no ceiling there. And I think we do have a role, of course. People like myself and many other people like myself who are active in British public life and elsewhere, to encourage, to mentor, to say this message over and over again. Nothing should hold you back.
Excellent. Yes, Theo.
Yeah, Jason, don't worry. I'm not going to put you under the hood. Don't be scared. We have the diaspora all over the world. We see examples of them in the US, how effective they are in lobbying and so forth. Australia, we have members of parliament who are from Greek Cypriot origin and so forth, which is very positive. And in the UK, you identified our only member of parliament, Charalambous, which we're very proud to have him. If we look at the other communities within the United Kingdom, the Jewish community, the Indian community, how more advanced they progressed within British politics. Sometimes I ask the question, why, when we've got a larger community than the Jews here in the UK, we haven't progressed. And I think my other question is, every diaspora has a federation. What is that role of that federation in actually bridging the gap of the first generation with the third and fourth generation, and bringing the young generation into an umbrella where they can help them to understand that by participating in politics, it will also help with a Cyprus solution?
Yeah. No, we have, of course, like as you say, with many communities, we of course have a federation, an organisation representing our community at official levels, and they do a tremendously. They work very hard, and they do a good job in many ways. They obviously are active in trying to encourage, particularly through the youth branch, younger people to come into the fold. Of course, there's more that can be done. There's always more that can be done. And I think it's always very important to be, dare I say, very much outward-looking as a community, particularly a community organisation. Don't necessarily just look inwards at the sort of people you're comfortable with. We should be reaching out. We should be reaching out. We have such accomplished people in this country who've never engaged with our organised community, in every field, who they are of Cypriot heritage. They are accomplished in their own rights. They feel Cypriot. They excel in Britain. But nobody has actually gone to them, identified them, gone to them and said, come into the fold. Can you help us collectively as a community? And it's a real exercise. It's a big job, and it should never stop. There's always an exercise in doing that, because a lot of people, when they're not approached, they'll feel this sort of reticence to sort of make the first move. Your other question was, the first one was... our diaspora, how it's... why we're not as effective maybe as other communities in...
Yes, no, I mentioned the other communities, the Jewish and Indian community. How have they developed? I mean, the Jews have, I think, 8 or 10 MPs in Parliament. If you look at the structure of their organisations, and I had a look at them, their organograms and so forth, they work very efficiently and effectively.
Yes.
With the support of their government in Israel.
Yes.
And I think that is something which has been discussed with our government as well, regarding the resources that our government can also offer us in order to help us to reach out. Sorry.
No, I think that's a very good point. I think basically the issue is, obviously we are, as I said, we are a young community. There are other communities in this country which are who've been here a lot longer, let's say, much more better rooted, deeply rooted in this society. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think, if we talk about wanting to engage better in public life, engage better with lobbying and influencing policymakers, and we need to, I have to say, to be brutal about it, is put our money where our mouth is. And I think our community suffers from a chronic shortage of investment in what is actually a professional exercise. You can't expect these things just to be shouldered by volunteers, which they have been by our community for decades now. People have worked, there's countless people in our community, like yourself, who work extremely hard as a volunteer to, sell our community and to help move things forward. But you know, it's time we actually started to invest, I think, and it's not just as a government, but it's actually as a community. You know, other communities, I've got to say, are far more philanthropic in this field than the Cypriot. We have great Cypriot philanthropists who contribute to many. In fact, we've seen, I think your family set up a foundation itself, giving a grant to. For academia. Yes. I just read that in the news yesterday. So it's a wonderful thing to see. You know, we are philanthropic in many areas, except when it comes to policy making. So I think, you know, I think investment in this field is the key to make an impact.
One more question.
Thank you. My name is Dimitrios Kavouras. I come from another diaspora, from the diaspora of Egypt. I'm from Alexandria. The role of the diaspora of Egypt, both Greek and Cypriot, they helped in bringing closer, not only historically with many individuals or the community itself that helped bringing peoples together and states, but also how today can the diasporas play a role. For example, we had a diaspora program called Nostos between the three countries, yes. Greece, Cyprus and Egypt. They managed to bring closer into some political developments in terms of agreements, cooperations between the three countries. How do you believe, how can the diasporas today, not only in the Eastern Mediterranean, an important, let's say, for Cyprus and the region, let's say, space for cooperation, but also we have a diasporas in Australia, in South Africa.
Yes.
How can all these diasporas play a role in bridging between the Cyprus and the other nations? Thank you.
Good question, a challenging one. Well, look, I think it's very important for these relationships to develop, particularly between diaspora communities in different countries. I think the Cypriots do it relatively well. They have organisations like BOMAC and things that do try and achieve that with limited budgets and resources, and actually quite effectively. I think diaspora communities integrating and building relationships with other diaspora communities, again, that's important, not least for sharing best practice. What are you doing that we can also benefit from, and what can we do that that you're and so on and so forth. So that is important, but I think we should get away from thinking ourselves as this word diaspora as foreigners in this land. We're not foreigners in this land. We are, we are as British and as English as anybody else, and so whilst we have our community is our community, and we have like-minded everything in common with our people of the same heritage, for sure, and that's where our strength comes from. We should be always looking outwards, not just inwards amongst ourselves. I think that's a key thing. And so building relationships is very important, but we should not forget that we are, in this country we are British, and we must contribute as much as possible in British institutions, in British civic life, in British political life, because only then will we I think elevate our community to the standing it deserves to be after so many years and considering its size.
Excellent. I think we have to stop here because we have another panel with online speakers. Jason, thanks so much. It was a great discussion.
Pleasure.
We'll continue now with, we have 3 more panels, one on geopolitics, one on education, and the last but not least on justice. And I'll ask Othon Anastasakis, Director of CSOX, to come to the floor.
Great, thank you
so much.
Cheers.